Well, I'm going to start off with sharing with you a little boo-hooey and then also a celebration. Last night, I shared maybe a goofy little prayer request with the Saturday night group. I heard more stories afterwards, too, about how they had wished for the same kind of prayer at some point in their time. But about 4 days ago, when it was beautiful weather outside, they had all the windows open. And, well, when you have all the windows open, this 9-year-old cat that I have pushed the window open, and for the first time of his life, gone. Now, I need to tell you, he has absolutely no survival skills. This guy does not know what a cricket or a grasshopper would be, and he was gone. I should also mention, he was a gift to me from my mother, and she always thought it'd be fun, and he's called a ragdoll cat. So when you touch him, he goes limp. All the other pets in the house know this because it's not fair game in our house at all. You touch him, and he can't fight back. I've been a little distracted. See this cat? It's part of our family story. I mean, he's been with us for 9 years, and I know some of you are shaking your heads because I heard every story on not having a cat come back. And little happy joys, but this is a little bit of our family. And last night at midnight, I'm getting ready to go to bed, and there's this cat trying to get into our house, and it's my little kitty. Now, I don't know where he's been because he looked good. And I know he's a little over the top with hygiene, but this cat did not look like he had spent the night out, let alone 4 full days. But it was answered prayer. Sometimes we wonder if the little things matter. And God says, yeah. Because even in those moments, there's compassion and forgiveness. There is a journey, and someday I'm sure that cat's going to make it into a full story of how I searched high and low for this cat. And when I left the light on, he found his way home. This goofy little cat. Let's turn to our scriptures today. We have a childlike story, don't we, in our scriptures? The story that many of us have learned about, the loaves of bread and fish. Now, this is not gourmet meal. This is loaves of bread packed in somebody's meal package and probably most likely dried out fish. We hear this story. Jesus is trying to get some rest. He's walked away from the crowds, and what happens? They follow him. Why? Because whatever he's talking about is so important, they want to hear more. And they may not understand all of it, but they want to hear more, and they believe what he can do and who he is to be true. So the crowds gather, and and what does he do? He has compassion on them and cures their sick. Well, they all sit down. We're not talking a couple hundred people. We're talking thousands and thousands of people. And they're with him. Now, I don't know how he did it without a microphone. I don't know how Jesus spoke and they all listened. But thousands and thousands of people have gathered. And they've gathered long enough that the hours of the day have gone by. And now it's mealtime. Those disciples that are by his side, they're like stagehands. They're like, event planners. They're looking at this thing going, okay, this is great. The guest speaker's done really well. This is wonderful. But it's time now to send the crowds home. And Jesus has a different solution. Let us listen to this solution that he says. They say, the hour is late. Send those crowds away so they may go into the village and they may buy food for themselves. Jesus says, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. In my mind, I guess I always thought that it was Jesus who looked at some little boy. I don't know how little boy got in here. I mean, there's 4 stories, by the way, of this exact same story because every gospel records this very story. It is the one and only story that all 4 gospels agree on. And that there was this time when he spoke and the people were hungry and they needed to be fed. Somehow thousands and thousands of people didn't bring a stitch of food, but somebody brought some bread and some dried fish. And the disciples looked out and they went, and Jesus went out and said, thank you. See, before he feeds them, before he gives it to the disciples, for the disciples to feed them. Remember what it says? You feed them. What did Jesus do? He took this humble meal and gave thanks. Are you hungry today? I don't know about you. Are you wondering about lunch? Some of you may have had a donut and a little juice for breakfast, and now you're getting ready for that next meal. You hungry? Would you be excited if I said after dinner we're all gathering downstairs for some bread and some dried fish? Let's fast forward. School's coming. And as school's coming, we all think about school lunches. Well, I'm the seventh of 9 children, and in my household, my mom was bound and determined that we would always have a sack lunch from home. Seventh of 9. She had lost a little energy by the time she got to me. So lunch now consisted of peanut butter and jelly on white bread, a bag of Lay's potato chips, still my favorite, a banana or apple, that was the health moment, and I don't know why, but always had a bag of chocolate chips. Then you would take your, at that time, nickel, dime, or whatever, and we would buy that nice cold carton of milk. I don't ever remember being hungry. And I'm pretty sure I even shared my meal often. Everybody knew what it was going to be. What was your school lunches like? Here at St. Paul and around this community, we have what's called the Anamosa Lunches for Our Youth, Ally. You may have heard of it. Well, I have the privilege most of the year long, they pack the bags together right across from my office. So I get to hear their stories. And at first, sometimes they're just chattery. And it depends on which church comes together, but they all gather together and they start talking. And, oh, this is great. Look at all this food. Look at that food will go into the bellies of children. But there is always that one conversation where people say things like, well, I wish I had food like this when I was a kid. I remember the day they gave away peanut butter, little containers of peanut butter, and someone even said, wow, do you know how much that costs? Do you know they are so lucky to get that much peanut butter? And my thought was, that's got to hold them for 4 days. And then someone saying, you know what, I understand that this is complicated, but we're doing something different here in Anamosa. We're going to feed kids who don't eat when there's not school. And you know what? We're just going to do it. And we're going to give thanks. And bellies are going to be full, and there's going to be enough. Are you hungry? You already thinking about where you're going to go for lunch? There will be enough. I'm wondering whether this passage is about food at all. We've been taught it's about having enough, right? Having food, flour and fish. And if you have flour and fish, your belly can be full. What if it's really about love and forgiveness? That God never runs out. What if this passage is about giving thanks? God, you will forgive a broken world. What if this is about you go give them something to eat? Translated into you go love the unlovable and go care for the hopeless. You know, there's a lot of chaos in this world right now. Across the oceans, it seems so huge. I don't know how to solve it, but we know it's wrong. We come closer, we have issues on the borders. Again, I don't know how to solve it, but there are people that are hurting. Let's get closer to home. They're right here in our neighborhood. It might be that there is even anger or frustration or hunger in your own home. So how do you read this message when you are empty inside? I wonder if that's what it means. That what he was talking about isn't that empty for food, but they are empty and they're longing to be filled with the good news that they are loved and they are forgiven. And we are to go and feed them. We are to care for them. And this week I've had a little time in the hospitals, and I want to share with you, sometimes when I get done with my visits, I kind of withdraw a little bit. I was in the elevator, and I'd put my back against the wall, and of course somebody came in, and I was just kind of doing one of those. And she came in, and I tell you what, she pushed the button, she hit the wall with her back, and she went, huh. I was a little tired. I didn't have my collar on. I was just a child of Christ. But I know what that sound means. And that's the sound of somebody who's empty, who is aching for compassion and kindness. I said to her, how you doing? She goes, well, not good. I've been here 2 days, and they've already had 4 surgeries. I don't even know who they is. I didn't know who she was talking about. She goes, I don't know if anything's going to work. And she's just talking to me, and I'm just hearing it. And the only thing I could respond with, I'm sorry. I am sorry that you hurt. I am sorry that you are loved. And I don't understand it. But God's with you always. I could have looked the other way. I was exhausted. I could have just done one of my sighs and looked down, pulled out the cell phone. But we are called to fill one another up. We are called to feed one another, whether it be with tangible food or with encouragement, compassion, peace. And when there is conflict, we are called to say, that's not okay. When we hear rumor, when we hear discourse, when we hear all this stuff, we go, wait a minute. Let us give God our thanks and praise. The disciples grumbled. Jesus gave thanks. And the disciples then, they fed those who were hungry. We are called to feed the hungry. We are called to be compassionate people. We are called today to love one another. Amen.